All right, let's talk about the rise and, well, the pretty spectacular fall of the learn to code movement. You remember, right? For years, this was pitched as the golden ticket to a solid middle-class life. So, what on earth happened?
Okay, let's start with a number, and this one is staggering. Check this out. Between 2011 and 2021, the number of computer science graduates at just one school, UC Berkeley, shot up by over 1,000%. I mean, that's not just growth, that's an absolute explosion.
And here's where it gets weird. You'd think with that tidal wave of new talent flooding the market, there'd be more developers than ever, right? Wrong. There are actually fewer software developers employed in the US today than there were 6 years ago. So what you end up with is this massive kind of shocking mismatch. You've got this huge surge in the supply of graduates crashing into a job market that's either stagnant or, in some cases, even shrinking. It just doesn't add up. It's a paradox that really makes you wonder, what went so terribly wrong here?
All right, to really get what happened, we've got to rewind a bit. Back to its origins. Think about the time right after the Great Recession. People were anxious, looking for answers. And into that void steps this new idea, learn to code. It wasn't just a career tip, it became this kind of economic gospel, a fix for everything.
And this message, it came from the very top. President Obama himself called coding a ticket to the middle class. And when a president says that, it's not just a career path anymore. Suddenly, it's a national priority.
And what's really fascinating here is how this one simple idea appealed to everybody. I mean, it had something for everyone. For Republicans, it's practical, vocational job training. Perfect. For big corporations, a steady pipeline of workers, basically trained on the taxpayer's dime. And for Democrats, it was this really hopeful, empowering message in a pretty bleak economic time. So boom, you get this powerful, completely unchallenged consensus.
And this idea really captures that oversimplified message that was being pushed out there. As President Biden famously put it, anybody who can throw coal into a furnace can learn how to program. The narrative was crystal clear. This is easy. This is a path for absolutely anyone.
So what was the result of all this hype? Well, exactly what you'd expect, a gold rush. We're talking about a totally unprecedented wave of students who heard that call and just flooded into computer science departments all over the country. But this created a huge fundamental problem, a bottleneck. See, while the number of undergrad CS students tripled in just 10 years, the number of PhD students, the people who actually become the professors, that number stayed almost completely flat. And the reason for that? It's just simple economics, really. I mean, think about it. Why would you stick around in academia making, what, $40,000 a year on a PhD stipend when you could go work for Amazon or Netflix and pull in over 200 grand? It's a no-brainer. There was just nobody left to teach the classes.
So, for the students, this situation turned into a total nightmare. We're talking about these impersonal, factory-like departments, giant classes with 4, 5, even 600 students packed in. It got so bad that some universities made students reapply to the major after they were already there. And a few even used a lottery system. Can you imagine that? You get into a great school, and then you lose your major because of a random lottery?
Okay, so into all this chaos steps a new player, a supposed savior, the coding boot camp. And their promise was simple, a faster, more efficient, and way more accessible path to that shiny six-figure tech job.
And the language they used was, well, it was lofty, almost revolutionary. The whole idea was that these old, stuffy, 4-year universities were about to be disrupted, completely out-innovated by these new, nimble, hyper-focused programs.
But here's the kicker. The really ironic twist. A super popular boot camp called Hack Reactor, its acceptance rate was just 3%. That's basically the same as Harvard. Yeah, so much for being the accessible alternative, right?
And this whole situation led to the boot camp's biggest problem. See, to really grow and scale up, they needed their students to get federal loans. So they found a loophole. They started partnering with universities. Here's how it worked. The university would lend its brand name and its access to federal loans, and in return, it would take a whopping 40% cut of the boot camp's revenue. So in the end, the so-called disruptors got swallowed whole by the very system they were trying to replace.
So you've got this whole system, right? The overcrowded universities, the boot camps that got co-opted, and it's all just chugging along, pumping out graduates for an industry that seemed to have an infinite appetite for more workers. It felt like it could go on forever. And then, the inevitable crash.
And when it hit, wow, it was brutal. We're talking nearly 500,000 tech workers laid off in 2023 alone. And that's not even counting the hundreds of thousands more who lost their jobs in the years right before and right after. Just a massive, massive wave of layoffs. The result was something we hadn't seen in a long, long time. The unemployment rate in the tech industry actually shot past the national average. That just doesn't happen. It completely shattered that myth that tech was this uniquely safe career haven.
I mean, the situation got so bad that professors at top-tier schools, like that Berkeley program we started with, they were reporting that even their absolute best, their brightest graduates, were struggling to find a job. Think about that. The top of the class couldn't get hired.
So, after all that, what's the real lesson here? How did this incredibly promising idea, this whole mantra, fail so spectacularly?
Well, when you boil it all down, it really comes back to the most basic economic rule in the book: supply and demand. The learn-to-code movement created this giant oversupply of programmers. So when the economy took a nosedive, companies looked around and, frankly, saw all these developers as expendable. There were just so many of them that it was easy to let them go.
And it's a really powerful reminder to keep things in perspective. Sure, software jobs are still projected to grow, and that's great. But look at other fields that don't get nearly as much hype, like wind turbine technicians or occupational therapy. They're expected to grow much, much faster.
But maybe the biggest lesson of all is this: chasing trends is risky. The real lasting value isn't in learning whatever the hot programming language of the month is. It's about developing those adaptable skills that work anywhere. Things like critical thinking, creative problem solving. That's your best defense when things get uncertain.
Which, of course, leaves us with one last, really important question. The learn-to-code bubble might have burst, but our habit of chasing the next big career fad, that hasn't gone anywhere. So, as you look around at the world today, it's worth asking yourself, what's the next learn to code?